Picture this, you're on the water and the fishing is incredible. Every cast seems to produce a bite. You feel like a hero, then you see the forecast. A massive cold front is blowing in. The temperature is set to drop 20 degrees overnight. You go out the next day, full of confidence, to the same spot with the same lure, and you get nothing. Not a single bite. It's like someone flipped a switch and turned the lake off. Sounds familiar, right? Today, we are tackling the #1 confidence killer in all of fishing, the post-cold front shutdown. But here's the secret. The fish don't just disappear and they don't get lockjaw. Most anglers make one fundamental mistake in these conditions that guarantees they go home empty-handed. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that mistake is and how you can beat the system. So let me ask you this, and be honest in the comments. Do you even bother fishing after a nasty cold front, or do you just call it a loss and stay home? For generations, the common wisdom has been simple. When a cold front hits, the fishing dies. We've all heard it from our grandfathers, from guys at the boat ramp, from fishing guides. They say things like, the barometer is too high, or the fish are sulking on the bottom. So what do most of us do? We either don't go, or we go out and fish. The same way we always do, get frustrated and confirm the old myth. We throw our fast-moving crankbaits and spinnerbaits, cover water, and then complain that nothing is biting. This cycle has been repeated for years. It's an accepted truth of fishing. But these beliefs are based on observation, not on understanding. People see that the bite stops, but they don't ask the right questions about why it stops. They blame the fish instead of their own approach. Today, we're going to break that cycle. First, let's kill the biggest myth right now, the idea of lockjaw. Fish do not get lockjaw. They are cold-blooded animals. They are slaves to their environment. They absolutely must eat to survive. They don't have the luxury of deciding to go on a hunger strike just because the weather changed. What they do have is a metabolism that is directly tied to the water temperature. When that temperature plummets, their internal engine slows way, way down. Think of it like this. On a warm summer day, you might feel energetic and want to run around. On a freezing winter day, you want to curl up on the couch under a blanket. Fish are no different. They aren't refusing to eat. They are physically incapable of acting as aggressively as they did just a day before. Understanding this is the first step to changing your entire approach. So what's really going on inside the fish? It's a metabolic shock. Imagine their body is a small factory. In warm water, that factory is running at full steam. It's digesting food quickly, burning energy, and needs more fuel all the time. This is why the bite is so good before a front. The fish are feeding up. When the temperature drops 10 or 15 degrees, that factory's power gets cut. Everything slows down. Digestion takes much longer. Their movements become slower and more deliberate. They are not in a feeding frenzy. They are in survival and conservation mode. They aren't looking to chase down a meal. They're looking for the easiest, most effortless calorie they can find. If you're still throwing a fast-moving lure, you are completely out of sync with the fish's new reality. This all comes down to a simple energy equation that every predator in nature understands. Will the energy I spend chasing that meal be less than the energy I gain from eating it? On a warm day, a bass will gladly rocket 10 feet to smash a topwater lure because its metabolism is high and the energy reward is worth it. But after a cold front, its body is in conservation mode. Chasing that same lure would be a massive waste of precious energy. The fish simply will not do it. It's not a choice, it's instinct. They will ignore a meal that requires a big effort. Your job as an angler is no longer to trigger a reaction. Your new job is to present a meal that is so easy, so effortless, that the fish would be stupid not to eat it. This is a huge mental shift from how most people fish. Now let's talk about that other boogeyman, barometric pressure. It's not just the temperature that changes. Cold fronts are associated with high-pressure systems. You get those beautiful, clear bluebird skies. While it looks nice to us, it's uncomfortable for the fish. Think of that high pressure as a physical weight pushing down on everything, including the water's surface. Fish are incredibly sensitive to these pressure changes. It affects their swim bladder, which is the organ they use to control their buoyancy. When the pressure is high and pushing down, it can make them feel, for lack of a better word, funky. They feel bloated and out of sorts. They don't want to move around a lot, and they certainly don't feel like chasing down a big fast meal. Let's dig a little deeper into that swim bladder. It's essentially a gas-filled balloon inside the fish. They can add or remove gas to hold their position in the water column. When a high-pressure system moves in, the external pressure on their body increases. This compresses the swim bladder. To compensate, the fish has to adjust, and this process can be physically uncomfortable for them. They seek out a depth and location where they feel the most stable and comfortable. Often this means they won't be roaming the open flats or suspending high in the water column. They will seek equilibrium. This discomfort is another huge reason why they aren't in an aggressive feeding mood. They are focused on stabilizing themselves, not on hunting. So, we know the fish feel sluggish and uncomfortable. This leads us to the first major mistake anglers make. They keep fishing the same spots. You were crushing them yesterday on a main lake point in 10 feet of water, so you go right back there the next day and fish it for hours, but the fish are gone. They haven't left the lake, but they have absolutely left that spot. The conditions that made that spot attractive yesterday, the water temperature, the pressure, the baitfish activity, have all changed. The fish have relocated to find a more stable and comfortable environment. If you're casting at empty water, it doesn't matter how perfect your lure or presentation is. You have to find where they went first. And here's the key. Fish often don't move far horizontally. They make a vertical move. That bass that was on the point in 10 feet of water probably didn't swim half a mile to a new location. It more likely just dropped off the edge of that same point and is now sitting in 20 or 25 feet of water. Or it moved from the outside edge of a weed line to the deepest, thickest part of it. Deeper water is much more stable. The temperature at 25 feet doesn't fluctuate nearly as much or as quickly as the temperature at 5 feet. The fish are seeking this stability, so your first adjustment shouldn't be changing your lure, it should be changing your depth. Look for the nearest deep water sanctuary to where the fish were before the front. What exactly do we mean by stable water? It's not just about depth. Stability is the name of the game. A deep channel bend, a steep bluff wall, the bottom of the deepest hole in a pond, these are all examples of stable environments. The temperature and pressure are less volatile there. The fish can just sit there and ride out the uncomfortable conditions without having to constantly adjust. They can just hang out and wait for things to get better. Your electronics are your best friend here. Use your mapping to find those sharp drop-offs, deep holes, or channel swings adjacent to the shallow flats where you were catching them before the front. That's your new target zone. Besides moving vertically, fish will also use cover differently. Before the front, a bass might have been roaming the edge of a brush pile, actively looking for a meal. After the front, that same bass will push itself into the absolute nastiest, thickest part of that brush pile. It will bury itself deep inside a lay-down tree or tuck itself so far under a dock it's almost unreachable. It's doing this for the same reason, security and stability. It feels safe and it's shielded from the elements. This means you have to change how you fish cover. You can't just cast to the edge of it anymore. You have to find a way to get your lure into the very heart of the cover, right on the fish's nose. And don't forget about the bait fish. The bass aren't the only things affected by the cold front. The shad, the minnows, the bluegill, they are all cold-blooded too. They get lethargic and slow down, just like the predators. And where do they go? They also seek out stable, deep water and tuck into cover. So the predator is simply following its food source. The entire ecosystem slows down and compresses. It moves deeper and tighter. If you can find the baitfish on your electronics bunched up in these deeper, stable areas, you can be 100% certain that the bass are nearby, even if they aren't actively feeding. They are just sitting there, waiting for an incredibly easy meal to drift by. This brings us to the second and arguably the most critical mistake that 99% of anglers make. Their lure is moving too fast. We are programmed as anglers to cast and retrieve. to cover water, to make things hop, twitch, and swim. After a cold front, that is the exact opposite of what you need to do. A lethargic base with a slow metabolism is not going to waste its energy chasing down your spinnerbait or your jerkbait. It will just sit there and watch it go by. It doesn't matter if it's the perfect color or makes the perfect sound. If it's moving faster than a crippled snail, it's moving too fast. Your retrieve speed is the single most important factor you can control. To fix this, you need to embrace a new philosophy. I call it the dead-sticking philosophy. This means you have to get comfortable with doing absolutely nothing. You cast your lure out to a high-percentage spot, that deep brush pile, that channel swing, and you let it sit, and then you let it sit some more. We're not talking about a few seconds. We're talking about 10 seconds, 20 seconds, sometimes even a full minute. This requires an insane amount of patience and mental discipline. It feels wrong. It feels boring. You'll be tempted to twitch it or move it. You have to fight that urge. You have to trust that your lure is sitting right in front of a fish, and you're just waiting for it to decide to open its mouth. Let's use a real-world example. Imagine you're fishing a simple football jig, a classic cold water bait. Normally, you'd cast it out, let it hit the bottom, and then hop or drag it back to the boat. After a cold front, your approach changes completely. You cast it to the heart of that deep brush pile. You let it fall on a slack line. Once it hits the bottom, you do not move it. You just watch your line. You wait for 30 seconds. Then, instead of hopping it, you slowly pull it just a few inches, and then you let it sit again for another 30 seconds. You're not fishing the jig in the traditional sense. You are just placing it in the strike zone and leaving it there. The reason this works is because the fish's strike zone has shrunk dramatically. Think of the strike zone as an invisible bubble around the fish. In warm water, that bubble might be 10 feet wide. The fish will see a lure anywhere in that bubble and go get it. After a cold front, that bubble might only be 6 inches wide. Your lure has to land directly inside that tiny bubble to even be considered a meal. The fish will not move to get it. This is why a painfully slow, dragging or dead-sticking presentation is so effective. It keeps your bait in that tiny strike zone for the maximum amount of time, giving that slow, lethargic fish the opportunity to finally eat it. So, what baits should you use? This is not the time for big, noisy, aggressive, power fishing lures. This is the time for finesse. Finesse is king in post-frontal conditions. Think small, subtle, and natural. A Ned rig is a perfect example. It's small, it stands up on the bottom, and you can just let it sit there. A drop shot is another killer because you can hold the bait in one spot, right off the bottom, and just shake it gently without moving it from the strike zone. Other great options are weightless soft plastics like a Senko or a light shaky head. The key is that these baits look alive even when you're not moving them. Now, when you do get a bite, it's not going to feel like you expect. You are not going to get that classic thump or tick on your line that you feel in warm water. A cold, lethargic base will often just gently suck the lure into its mouth and sit there. The bite will feel mushy. It might feel like you've snagged a wet sponge or a clump of grass. Sometimes the only indication you have is a slight feeling of weight on your line that wasn't there before. Other times, you won't feel anything at all. You'll just see your line start to slowly swim away to the side. If anything feels different, set the hook. This is why line watching becomes one of the most important skills you can have in these conditions. You need to use a high visibility line, like a bright yellow braid, with a fluorocarbon leader. After you cast, keep a little bit of slack in your line and just stare at where it enters the water. Watch for any subtle jump, twitch, or sideways movement. That is your bite indicator. Many of the biggest fish caught in tough post-frontal conditions are caught by anglers who saw the bite instead of feeling it. You have to train your eyes to detect that almost imperceptible change. It's a true test of focus and a skill that will pay off. Honestly, the hardest part of all this is the mental game. It is incredibly difficult to force yourself to fish this slowly. It goes against every instinct we have as anglers. Our brains are telling us to cover water and make more casts. To sit there and do nothing for a minute at a time feels like a waste of time. You will get bored, you will get impatient, you will start to second-guess yourself. This is where most people fail. They'll try it for 5 minutes, get impatient, and go right back to power fishing. You have to commit to it. You have to have the mental fortitude to trust the process, even when it's painfully slow. This discipline is what separates the great anglers from the good ones. So let's put this all together into a simple game plan. Step 1. Forget the spots where you caught them yesterday. Use your maps to find the nearest deep water structure or cover to those areas. Think steep banks, channel bends, and deep holes. Step 2. Idle over those areas with your electronics and look for signs of life. Look for the bait fish. Look for fish tucked into deep brush or sitting on the bottom. Step 3. Pick your finesse weapon of choice. A Ned rig, a drop shot, a jig. Step 4. Make targeted casts to those specific pieces of cover. And Step 5, the most important step. Fish painfully, agonizingly slow. Let it soak. Be a line watcher. Be patient. And then comes the payoff. After an hour of mentally grueling slow-motion fishing, you see your line just barely twitch. You reel down, sweep the rod, and feel dead weight. Then that weight starts to move and a big, heavy head starts shaking. You've hooked into a giant lethargic base that nobody else on the lake could get to bite. The feeling of success in these conditions is 10 times more satisfying than catching fish on an easy day. You didn't just get lucky, you outthought the fish, you understood the conditions, you adapted your strategy, and you executed it with patience and discipline. You beat the cold front. So, let's wrap this all up. The big game-changing takeaway is this: cold fronts do not give fish lockjaw. They just put them into a slow, energy-conserving state. They move to deeper, more stable water, they bury themselves in the thickest cover they can find, and they absolutely will not chase a fast-moving meal. The single biggest mistake is continuing to fish fast and shallow, just like you did before the front. The aha moment, the real turning point, is realizing that you need to change your entire mindset. You are no longer trying to trigger an aggressive reaction. You are trying to deliver a ridiculously easy meal directly to the fish's mouth. It's a game of inches, not feet. Once you truly embrace this slow, patient, finesse-based approach, cold fronts stop being a death sentence for your fishing trip. They become a challenging puzzle that you now have all the pieces to solve. Thank you so much for watching. If this changed how you think about cold fronts, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And now I have a question for you all. What's the absolute longest you've ever intentionally let a lure sit completely still in one spot, waiting for a bite? Be honest, let me know in the comments below.